A very, very rainy and yucky October night. I'm very, very happy to be here. My name is Nicole Paley, as Amber said. Because tonight is about one's relationship with themselves, I wanted to start off with an activity that kind of brings you into yourself, since my hope is that you leave tonight feeling more connected to yourself in a really warm, positive way. So I'm going to ask that everyone who has something in their hands just put it to the side. And how's my voice, by the way? Is it loud enough for those in the back? You can always try to speak up. I've been told I have a quiet voice. And get comfortable in your seats. And it's going to be a little self-scan exercise and a brief guided meditation, so to speak. So get as comfortable as you can in your seats. And I would encourage you, if you have your legs crossed or one of your feet up, that you get both feet on the floor, just to get as grounded as possible. And maybe for the purposes of this, I might close the lights just a little bit. And have your hands resting on your lap comfortably. And your eyes can either be closed, if you're comfortable with that, or if not, just downcast. And I'm going to invite you to start turning inward now. And as much as possible, to imagine that instead of being in a room filled with people, and with me with you, that you're actually just by yourself. Me, myself, and I. And as you're turning that focus inward, you're going to accompany that inward focus with really, really tenderly focusing on your breath. So nice, long, slow inhales through your nose. And letting out nice, deep, slow exhales. So just really letting go of everything that you can and just focusing on your breathing for now. And now I invite you to turn that attention inward towards your mind and asking yourself the question, where is my mind at right now? And just from an observational place, a non-judgmental place, just to check in. Am I thinking lots of thoughts, a busy, chaotic mind maybe? Or are the thoughts kind of just slowly going in and out of your awareness? So just a nice, non-judgmental check-in with where is my mind at right now? Next, I invite you to turn that attention towards your body. So from head to toes, how is my body feeling right now? And again, just noting from a non-judgmental place, oh, there's some tension here. There's some warmth here, stiffness, ease, my shoulders bothering me. Just observing, how is my body feeling right now? And lastly, I invite you to turn that loving attention towards your emotional self. Asking yourself, how am I feeling emotionally right now? And that might be connected in some ways to the thoughts and the body sensations. But asking yourself, what are the emotions that I'm feeling right now? And it could be that there's one predominant one, or it could be a mixed bag of various emotions. But again, just observing non-judgmentally, how am I doing emotionally right now? And I'm just going to give you a few moments and take your own pace with this one to have this be a nice check-in with yourself about how you're doing right now, or feeling. And when you're ready, you can return your attention to the front. Hopefully that was nice or helpful in some way. So I believe that everyone came here tonight because they either want to raise their consciousness and evolve their relationship with themselves, or they want to help other people do that. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what brought me here. I have been a counselor for over 10 years now, and I've worked with people from all different populations and ages, individuals, couples, families. And I've also done a lot of both formal research when I was in graduate school and university, and also my own self-guided research. And what I've learned through all of these years of clinical practice and my own research is that the thing that everyone has in common, all of these clients that I've seen, and also all the people I know in my personal life, the thing that everyone has in common is that they struggle to some extent with their relationship with themselves. And that relationship is full of various wars and difficult feelings and constant battles with feeling, okay in one's skin and accepting who they really are. And in my own life, it's been pretty difficult as well. When I was a young child, I think I already had a really, really difficult time being okay with who I was. And I was a sensitive girl, and I spent years and years having a really hard time finding kindness towards myself. And when I became an adult, and then went on to become a counselor, intellectually I understood the idea of self-compassion and self-kindness, and I'd be working on it with clients, and I'd be talking to friends about it. And so I got it cognitively, but it's always been a very difficult concept to embody and to really feel. And that's a young me. I still have the same hair after all these years. I'm like 5 there. And so the idea of self-compassion, I said this to someone recently for myself, and I don't know if this would be true for any of you. It was like a room that was locked up. And every now and then I could get into the room and feel what it felt like to just be at peace with myself and to not be dealing with all these negative self-beliefs and difficult feelings that are connected to those beliefs. Every now and then I could get into that room for a little respite, but most of the time it was this room that I knew of, that I could speak of about with clients, with my friends, with my family's members, but I couldn't feel it. And so I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I've really devoted a lot of my professional life and my work with my clients, and also with the professionals that I work with, as well as my personal life, to self-compassion. And it's my belief that self-compassion is an active process. and that it's a discipline, and it's something that we have to tend to, all of us, each and every day of our lives. And I think I had this idea when I was younger, and it wasn't until recently that I was like, no, that doesn't work. But it just kind of passively happens. That I'll just passively at some point just be like, oh yeah, I'm good. And I can just love everyone else, because now I've kind of got that, self-kindness figured out. But no, it's like a garden that you have to keep nurturing and keep being mindful of. But I do believe that it's achievable by all, and that it is about the process. So that's a little bit about me. So just to let you know, I'm going to be doing a bit of speaking to you, and then I'm hoping that tonight becomes quite interactive. So there's a psychologist in the States named Kristin Neff, and maybe some of you have heard of her before. And she's a meditation teacher. She's a psychologist. She did her graduate work years ago in the moral development of children. And now she's one of the heads of an institute based in the States, but they work globally, called the Mindful Self-Compassion Institute. And she was the first person who started really studying self-compassion in a scholarly way. So I wanted to use her conceptualization of self-compassion just to guide and frame the workshop tonight. So Kristin Neff says that self-compassion is comprised of these three components. Number one, having both an understanding and a kindness towards one's difficulties, and being warm and kind during the setbacks and the failures in life. So not only being able to understand oneself and all the different difficulties that one struggles with or comes up against, but also being able to be kind during all the ups and downs in life, especially the downs. The second component of self-compassion, according to Kristin Neff, is having a sense of common humanity and a connection to others. And this comes up if you want to go home and look at the research, or maybe you already have looked at it, is such a huge part of self-compassion is actually not feeling like a separate self, isolated on one's island, living some, difficult experience that no one else is living, but really, really being aware of my imperfections, my insecurities, the things that I'm fearful of in life, death, illness, rejection, failure. This is human life. And that awareness is what allows us to actually be softer towards ourselves, because we're aware that it's part of the human experience. We're able to give that softness to other people, or that warmth to other people, and so we should also be able to experience it ourselves. An interesting point about that, and I don't want this to be a big research talk, but I've definitely read a lot of the research, so I want to share some of it, is an interesting study that Kristin Neff and a few other researchers did, it was with teenagers, was that the more that someone believed in their own personal unique fable, their own I'm such a unique person, both in negative ways but also in positive ways, the more unhappy they were and the less self-compassionate they were. So in other words, the more we kind of just feel like I'm just a normal person. And yeah, Monday mornings are really difficult to go to work, and probably a lot of other people feel that way. Or man, waiting to get the test results for what I think could be cancer is super anxiety provoking. Just to give a serious example, but that's human. That's what people go through. The more we kind of just feel like we're just in some ways like everyone else, the easier life is for us. And so that's something to be mindful of. And the last component of self-compassion is mindful awareness and acceptance of painful thoughts and feelings, but not over-identifying with them. So that self-scan that I did with you in the beginning is a mindfulness activity. And I think this is a really key one. So it's being able to be aware or conscious of what you're feeling or what your thinking is, not over-identifying with it and becoming the feeling or becoming the thought, being able to recognize it and kind of move on with things. and being able to care for yourself in that time as quickly as possible. Come to your own rescue with self-compassion. I thought I would also give just a little example of the common humanity, because it came up for me the other day. I was emailing with a good friend of mine who's a textile artist. And she went to this wonderful workshop the other day on dyeing, using natural dyes. And she was writing to me about it, and the beginning part of the story was that she had had this great time at the workshop and she learned so much. And then she said, but honestly, it was actually a difficult experience for me, because a lot of the workshop I found myself being jealous of the woman who was running it. And projecting onto this woman that she just lives this easy life, and she goes to India and she gets all these materials and she lives her tidy, nice little life. So instead of my friend being able to fully enjoy the workshop, she found herself being really assaulted by feelings of envy or jealousy with the woman who was running the workshop. And then on top of that, feeling really embarrassed and really self-critical that here she was being jealous, and that she shouldn't be jealous, and that this is so embarrassing. And so she shared this with me. And so then I was able to say, oh, I totally get it, and I get jealous too of, this person and that person. And then we were able to give each other that compassion. And it was just all about normalizing for each other, like, this is just part of the human experience. Oh well, la-di-da, let's carry on. And so now, since then, when I've had even just little moments of envy or jealousy, which aren't fun to admit, but I have them too. I remember that funny conversation that the two of us had, and I immediately am fine. So you might be able to think about in your own life how that might come about.
May I ask?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you want the lights back on or not.
Oh, thank you for asking. Maybe.
No.
No? Well, and where did Amber go? Amber, does it matter?
Well, I'm wondering how it looks in the video.
It's not good for your video, and I can't see your face.
Okay. The light.
That's why
Sorry
I'm
for
asking.
those who like the
That's why
dim
I'm
light.
asking.
The light's going back on. Many of you, I think, have heard of Pema Chodron, but I don't know for sure. But she's a very well-known Buddhist teacher. And this is one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to read it, but I'm also just going to allow you some time just to sit with it. But it's really about what I'm here for tonight. So compassion isn't some kind of self-improvement project or ideal that we're trying to live up to. Having compassion starts and ends with having compassion for all those unwanted parts of ourselves, all those imperfections that we don't even want to look at. So this is one of my favorite quotes, because to me what having a kind relationship with yourself is all about is being able to really, really fully, wholeheartedly be there for yourself. Not just when things are going easy or getting positive feedback from the world around you, but especially fiercely about the times and about the parts of yourself that aren't so easy to look at. So the times when you yelled at your mom or guilt tripped someone, or weren't the greatest employee, or weren't the best partner, or disappointed yourself in one way or the other. Being able to really lovingly, compassionately be there for yourself, and be able to be aware of when you're in that space of like that harshness and the self-hatred, and be able to take a step back and step into yourself in a kind way. Anyways, I love this quote. It's easy to find on Google. So self-compassion, like I said earlier, I believe, isn't just something that just happens passively or in an osmosis type way, but it's something that we have to really practice on a daily basis. So it's in some ways a very simple concept, and it's very topical too. I mean, you probably hear people all the time say, oh, be self-caring towards yourself. And I know that a lot of you in this room are mental health professionals, so you probably say it to clients, you probably hear it from your colleagues. You know, how are you practicing good self-care? Are you being kind towards yourself? There's all sorts of quotes about it. There's memes on the internet about it. But none of that sits with us in our bodies unless we're practicing it. And that's another piece of self-compassion that Kristen Neff often talks about, is that it's not just some heady concept. It's an embodied practice, and we experience it in our bodies, and it's something that we have to give good care to each day. So we live in a world that is full of formal and informal evaluations happening all the time, right from the get-go. It happens in one's personal life, it happens at school from a very young age when kids are in kindergarten. I'm a school counselor, as Amber said, so I see it happening. Some of these assessments are necessary for one's healthy and positive growth and development. But either way, all of these formal and informal evaluations and judgments about attractiveness, how intelligent one is, how funny one is, how cool one is, how able one is, how talented one is, fill up a young person at a very young age before they're even able to cognitively or psychologically agree with or disagree with the feedback that they're getting, that they internalize it, and that becomes their identity. And in my work as a counselor all these years, I've been able to see that some of these evaluations, and of course, like I said, some are very helpful and fundamental to the growth and development as human beings, but those that are less helpful, and it could come out of the mouths of parents, teachers, sports coaches, can lead to a wide variety of mental health issues. Another interesting truth about self-compassion, based on tons of research that's been done, and there's been about 200 studies so far in self-compassion, is that people who are high in self-compassion tend to have a much easier time in their interpersonal romantic relationships, tend to have an easier time being parents, and their kids benefit from that because there's ease. Have an easier time with conflicts both in their personal life and their professional life. So self-compassion isn't just about me for myself, it's me for others. So question, how many, and some of you might know the answer to this, how many thoughts do you think we have on average a day? And just with a hand up so I know who might want to answer it.
3,000.
More.
10,000.
More. Yes.
25,000.
A little bit more. About 30 to 60,000, which is quite a range. But according to the research, which I'm sure isn't very easy to do, that kind of research. But according to the research, apparently, about 30 to 60,000 a day. So of those thoughts that we're having all day long, tons and tons of thoughts, about 35 a minute, how many do you think are negative?
70%.
So about 80+%, hovering around the 80% average. And of those 80%, the majority are negative about oneself. And even some of those, if they superficially seem to be negative about someone else, if they were analyzed, some of that's still about oneself. And that's kind of taking a psychological lens there. So if you think about it, each of us are walking around all day long, and all the people you see at work, and your family members, and your partners, and all the people you see walking around Vancouver are thinking a lot of thoughts, a lot, and most of those are negative, and the majority of those negative are negative about themselves. And that, for me, is sad. However, it's also something that we can all work together on so that we can be not just psychologically healthy, but physically healthy. Another interesting piece about self-compassion is it's not just some nice concept to talk about in a psychological way or in an emotional way, but there's a real physiology backing it. So there's a real science behind self-compassion. So I'm not going to get too into it, but just very, very briefly. So on the studies on self-compassion, so when someone's having self-compassionate thoughts, the body releases oxytocin. So oxytocin is also something that's released when a mother gives birth to their baby, and it helps with the bonding. But it's also released when people are falling in love, and that also helps with the bonding. And it's a neurotransmitter, and it's also released when someone feels cozy or comforted, or there's affection that they're giving or receiving. In essence, oxytocin helps us feel relaxed and helps us feel ease. Conversely, when we're being self-critical, when we're filled with all those negative thoughts about ourselves and also maybe about others, our body's on alert, and our amygdala in our brain is really active. And what the amygdala does is it releases a lot of cortisol, and it puts us into that fight or flight response. So anyone who's taken any psychology, and I believe a lot of you have taken a lot of psychology, you know about the fight or flight response. And that's not good to our bodies. So on just a physical level or a physiological level, we're putting ourselves in danger by being self-critical. And then we're putting our loved ones in danger because they might lose us in one way or another. I'm gonna actually just skip this for a second. So, could people share, and it doesn't have to be about yourself, what are some negative self-beliefs that people have about themselves? And I'm just going to give you a couple examples. So one might be, I'm lazy. So just with a show of hands, it could just be anything that comes to your mind. What are some negative beliefs that people have?
I don't fit in.
I don't fit in.
I'm irresponsible.
I'm irresponsible. I'm just repeating it,
Not
just
good
to make
enough.
sure everyone hears. Not good enough.
Oh, yeah.
Fat? I'm never positive.
I'm never positive.
Fat, being fat?
I'm overweight or I'm fat.
Stupid.
Education?
Pardon?
Education, level of education?
I don't have enough education. And I'm going to add to that, like I'm not smart enough or I'm not hardworking enough. Any others? So, universally, the self-schemas or the self-scripts that people tend to struggle with tend to be, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, some of these were said, I am less than, I'm incompetent, I am unattractive, I'm a bad person or immoral, like there's something kind of not so clean about me, I'm a failure, there's something wrong with me, I'm a burden on others. So when I was in grad school, which is now surprisingly a number of years ago, time just seems to be going quickly, one of my instructors introduced to my grad class, it was in a group therapy class, this idea of script, or this concept of script theory. And script theory was created by a psychologist in the 70s named Dr. Byrne. And my instructor in grad school did this exercise where we all had to break up into groups and we had to discuss what our self-scripts were from childhood. What are the ones that have really stayed with us and have kind of scripted how we operate in life, how we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, our behaviors. What are the fundamental core scripts we have about ourselves? And that's what script theory is about. And interestingly, these were the ones that just came up again and again and again. And if you think back to the earlier slide I showed about common humanity and kind of how we're all quite similar, here we go. I am getting into a more interactive part, so thank you for being with me. So maybe some of you like Seinfeld. Who likes Seinfeld in here? Okay, I love Seinfeld. When I was much younger, someone I was babysitting said I reminded them of a lady. That's a compliment. And I love this scene. A therapist said to me, a way back who I was seeing, I'm not ashamed, I'm a therapist, I'm proud to be someone who goes to therapy every now and then. We were talking about my challenges with self-compassion and some of my insecurities. And he said something to me which really stayed with me, which is he did it in such a physical way, so I think some of his physicality really spoke to me. He just went like, "This is me, so shoot me." And he said it kind of like, almost like he was out of breath. And it completely was congruent with how I was feeling, which is like, I'm so tired of being so hard on myself every day. And so we were laughing about this idea of, whatever, I give up. Here I am, this is me, so shoot me. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and also talk about the importance in self-compassion of having a sense of humor about it all. Like being confident in your unconfidence, or enjoying your imperfections, or laughing about how hard it is to be kind towards yourself. And I was talking to my mom the other day, I'm very close to her. I was talking to her about doing this workshop tonight. She says, "Gosh, you make self-compassion sound so serious." And she said, "Can it ever be fun?" And I was like, "Yeah, it can. Yes, thank you for reminding me." So this is there for that, having fun with it. And knowing that everyone's kind of struggling and having fun with it in their own ways. Some of the things that get in the way of people being self-compassionate, I wanted to mention. So some myths about self-compassion. Before I show the answers, so to speak, anyone have any ideas? What do you think some myths about self-compassion might be? And maybe you're not a believer in it anyways, but what are some of the myths? Yeah?
That it's somehow self-indulgent,
Yeah?
self-centered.
Yeah?
You need to criticize and be hard on yourself to improve and grow.
Right. Yes, that's exactly. And so I'm just going to comment on that one. Who here ever finds, and if you think about it kind of psychologically and physically, that when you're being kind of hard on yourself, you get a charge?
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe if I'm really, really hard on myself for eating too much last night, I'm going to have the energy to work out really hard, just as one example. Or if I blame myself enough for how, hard I've been in this relationship or in this friendship, maybe I'm going to like guilt myself enough into being like finally a great, person. So we get kind of a charge, and then we believe in that charge, and that whole idea of like no pain, no gain. A lot of us really buy into that, and either you buy into it consciously or you buy into it subconsciously. Any other ideas in self-indulgent? Yeah, that's coming. So self-compassion is self-pitying or egocentric. So that can be a barrier between one being self-compassionate or kind towards oneself. So, basically being self-compassionate is narcissistic. Or too self-loathing, or another one, self-compassion is self-indulgent. So in other words, maybe if I become too self-compassionate, I'm just going to be some hedonistic person who's just, here enjoying good things too much, or who knows. Self-criticism is an effective motivator. That's another one. Whereas the truth is that there's actually nothing motivating about criticizing yourself. And so even though, and this is according to Kristen Neff, even though sometimes momentarily or in the short term, being self-critical can seem like a motivator, can kind of give you that charge, can fill your body with cortisol or adrenaline, can pump you up in some ways, over time, it stresses your body out. It depletes, the good energy in your soul, in your spirit, and isn't psychologically healthy. And so even if you do achieve great things, you're going to be miserable anyways. An interesting thing, too, is that self-compassion is often confused with self-esteem. And they're actually very, very different concepts and practices. So self-esteem is still very evaluation-based. It's I'm superior, I'm inferior. I need to boost myself up, I need to be better, I need to improve. Whereas self-compassion is I'm going to be there for myself however I am. I'm going to be there for myself in the grief that I'm feeling. I'm going to be there for myself in how embarrassed I feel right now. I'm going to be there for myself when it seems like no one else is. Whereas self-esteem is about revving oneself up or feeling really down. And in the research, and self-esteem can play a good role in one's life, but occasionally self-esteem is also correlated with narcissism, being egocentric, being too concerned with social rank or social position, and it is quite unhealthy in a lot of ways, whereas self-compassion is that softness. And even if you break it down to cortisol versus oxytocin, there's connections there. So it's an interesting thing, because people often confuse when you talk about self-compassion, or when I've talked about it, isn't that just about self-love? And they're actually different things. So, like I've been saying, greater self-compassion leads to healthier and happier relationships, more emotional resiliency, and less psychopathology. It takes courage and patience. And now, I would love, I'm going to now go through a few exercises, and then that will be our time together. And thank you for being so wonderful. I feel so blessed. Is there anyone in the room who would be comfortable being a volunteer? And you can share as much as you feel comfortable sharing, but the exercise is going to involve sharing a negative self-belief that you have, or a negative self-script. Yeah? Come on up. So I'm going to just prepare the chairs. And I'm happy to talk to you more after the workshop about different ways that you can do this. And there's different ways that it can be done. Something I didn't say to Jeanette when she was up here. If you are doing it with yourself, or you're doing it with a client, and the person's having a hard time coming up with those self-compassionate statements, or being a compassionate observer, you can say to them, what if you were talking to your best friend? What if you were talking to a child? What if you were talking to someone that you just had all the compassion and care in the world for? So if they're having a hard time saying it to themselves, how would they say it to someone that they were able to give themselves the freedom to say it to? So, thank you again. Just seeing where I'm at for time. So I'm just going to do a couple of more activities. This one is for everyone, and I'm going to give a little qualifier to that. So, similar to in the beginning when I did a self-scan with you, you're going to be sitting in your chairs, and I'm going to guide you through something. It does involve focusing on a painful situation. You're not sharing it with everyone. This is just in your own private world. If you're either feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing in my life and everything's so joyful and I just can't connect to any pain at all, opt out. Or if you're feeling like, I'm actually feeling quite sensitive right now, I'm not up for doing this activity, daydream. I'm not in your mind, so I don't know what you'll be thinking about. But if you are up for this, I'm going to walk you through it. And this is an exercise called Soften, Allow, Smooth. So I just ask you, like I did in the beginning, I am going to get the lights for this one. If you do have something in your hands, and I can always tell you more about the exercise if you want to write notes after, just to put whatever's in your hands down, so you have your hands free. And close your eyes if you're comfortable, and if you're not comfortable with your eyes closed, you can just have them downcast. And just be in a restful, comfortable position. And this is a time, here and now, to gently turn your attention inward. I'm going to ask you to think of a situation in your life, and it could be something very recent, very fresh. It could be something that's long ago but still has residue, that's caused you some amount of emotional pain about who you are as a person. And so, very briefly, you're going to visit that scenario or that situation in your mind. And now I'm going to ask you to do a thinking or a cognitive exercise and identify what is the negative self-script that's attached to this scenario. And there might be a few, but try to locate a main one, the dominant one. And we talked about self-scripts earlier, so it could be the I'm unlovable, it could be I'm no good enough, but just what's the main self-script that's attached to this scenario? And next, I want you to turn your attention to your emotional self and note, non-judgmentally, what are some of the emotions that are attached to this self-script? And there could be a few different feelings. There usually are. But in all of those, try to find the main emotion that is the umbrella over this story. That's the most pressing, or that's the heaviest, or the hardest to handle. Next, I ask that you find in your body, as these stories and these feelings and these thoughts manifest in our physical bodies, where in my body is this story? Where have I been carrying it? And it might be a few different places. And just noting, where in my body is this story? And again, trying to find out what's the main zone for this story in your physical self. And we're going to work here as individuals, but as a collective, because we all care for each other as humans, on softening to start out with. So I want you to find a gesture that you can give yourself physically that shows affection or compassion. For me, I'll just share that my gesture tends to be touching my collarbones, and you might have something. So just very briefly, what's a gesture that you can give yourself physically that shows kindness or affection?
Do you want us to answer?
No. So you can do that. Thank you. So I want you to give yourself that kindness physically. Next, I invite you to allow yourself to be with the thoughts and the feelings that you have. So just allowing for. And that's that allowing for the difficult stuff that happens in life to be in us. Because it's okay, because it's part of being a human being. We don't have to run from it. So that's allowing. And lastly, I want you to offer yourself, kind of like Jeanette did earlier with her story, some words of self-compassion. And you might need to spend a little bit of time coming up with those right words for you. but the words that you need to hear around this story. The words that you are begging to hear all this time from yourself. And you're going to be speaking those words to the part of your body that's carrying this story. And from those words, releasing the pain, even just a little bit that sits there, with compassion. The balm of compassion. I'll just give you a few more moments with yourself. But I do ask that you remember those words that you gave yourself and the physical feeling that you felt in your body when you gave yourself compassion. And so you can return to the room when you're ready. And so I'm just going to make a few more suggestions before we round up. Something that I often suggest to clients and work with them on in session or suggest for homework, and something that I do myself in my own self-compassion work is something I call giving daily permission for self-warmth, or giving daily permission. And you might have your own version of this already at play. And all it is, lights? All it is in my world, and you can do this in a variety of creative ways, is I actually, I have a friend of mine, and we're both working on self-compassion together. And we text each other every morning, or nearly every morning, today I give myself permission to. And we actually now have got to a point where we just write T-I-G, I'm losing it. Today I give myself permission to, but in letters. It's been a long day. And then we write it. And we share with each other every day what our permission is. And so sometimes my permission is, today I give myself permission to make fun of myself, or to not take myself so seriously, because that's something I struggle with, because I can take myself very seriously, my problems very seriously. Or today I give myself permission to laugh a lot, or today I give myself permission to be okay with how hard things can be, and to dance in all of it, and then she'll write back to me. I also know I could be doing this on my own. It just happens to be that I share it with a good friend of mine. And I wrote up here routine to ritual, because I like this idea that in our work on ourselves, that the acts of self-compassion, or the ways that we're tending to ourselves, shouldn't just be things that we're checking off on our to-do list, but that they become sacred rituals, that they mean that much, that they're not just these things that we're trying to get through. Oh yeah, I should go to yoga, or I should, I don't know, I should eat healthy, or I should be kind to myself. Check mark. It's something that I think belongs in a different space in our spiritual selves, so to speak. And another suggestion that I work on with clients is coming up with an image that they have that they can go to when they're feeling like they're having a hard time being okay with themselves or kind to themselves. So this is something that, as a counselor, I work on in session with developing. So it could be, and for those counselors in the room, this is similar to having a safe space, but it's a little bit different, so to speak. So it could be an actual image of, when I imagine myself walking in the woods, I immediately feel some sense of peace or some sense of surrender. So that might be someone's, image that brings them a feeling of self-warmth or peacefulness. For another person, it might be, being at the beach. It might be being in their bed at home. Or sometimes it could be another image or a sound or a smell or a word that immediately reminds them of like the importance of their self-compassion rituals. And so I'll just share one example. So a client that I'm working with right now who's dealing with a lot of grief because there was a death in her family. I was asking her the other day in a session, what makes you kind of feel when you're being really hard on yourself and you're having a really hard time with the people around you, what kind of gets you out of that and into a place of feeling like, I can breathe and I'm okay with me. And what she came up with is the family member that died, thinking about that family member's laugh. And she said to me, I know this is going to be kind of weird because it's, this deceased person's laugh, but actually when I think about their laugh, I feel like good again. And I related to that because I had a sister that died when I was 18. And what immediately puts me into a good space is just, her name was Lynn, my sister's. I just immediately think about Lynn. She used to go to Wreck Beach. Don't know that. But anyways, we grew up in Vancouver. And so I picture her on Wreck Beach and just being light and happy. And she was a very warm, sparkling human being who died too young. But thinking about her actually reminds me of it's okay to be okay, who I am. And so that's something you can work on with yourself or with a client. And we are basically done. Yeah. So this is my contact info if you would like to be in touch with me. I do have printed out for those who are interested, and I can also give you information. It's also very Googleable for researching any self-compassion information. But I have up here self-compassion scales. So it's just a little scale for how self-compassionate you tend to be. It's something you can, again, use with clients if you work with clients in a helping professional role or with yourself. So I'll just keep these up here. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Nicole, what's the meditation slide that you skipped over?
Oh,
Is that
so
a meditation?
that was, I was going to do another meditation, but my sense is that we've done enough tonight because I changed one of them a little bit. So I didn't do it. Is the answer? Yeah.
Maybe one another time.
Yeah.
Would you elaborate?
Sorry, if I could just interrupt for a sec. We'll turn the videotape off for the questions just so they're not captured.